This is the In the Rabbit Hole episode archive project. What you're about to watch and listen to is a past episode from In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel now.
And now, two guys who survived eating paste as kids, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we survive our survival partnerships. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Whether you're already a crack shot or have never taken a bit of instruction in your life, we could all become better marksmen. Join the volunteers at Project Appleseed for a day or even a weekend of rifle instruction that is second to none. Find out where marksmanship meets history by connecting with the good folks at appleseedinfo.org or click on the 3 Strikes of the Match banner under the We Support heading in the right-hand column of In the Rabbit Hole. Remember, your rifle isn't going to shoot itself. So impress your friends, impress your neighbors the next time you're at the range. And don't miss out on the chance to shoot for free and earn your rifleman's patch today. We've gotten a great response from the writer call-out. A lot of really cool stuff has been coming in, and I wanted to thank everybody that has written in and that has offered to start writing for In the Rabbit Hole and really start sharing their knowledge. There is such a wealth of great information out there with all of you listeners. Some of you just amaze me constantly with some of the really interesting things that you've done and know how to do. And I think it's great that a lot of you are starting to share that information on the blog. And I'm really looking forward to everybody reading all of the really neat stuff that's coming out. And I also want to say that's not an excuse not to chip in and share your information, cool experiences, and just all around great knowledge. We're looking for all kinds of things for people to write about. Survival fiction is a great one. If somebody wants to come on and be a survival fiction reviewer, that would be really awesome. And anything, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. If it relates to survival in any way, you have a penchant for writing, shoot us a line and let's talk and see about getting you on the blog and share whatever you'd like to about survival. We're also looking for a lot more guests on the show. I know we've been call out that's been going on where we're saying, hey, help us find more guests. And if you're a listener and you want to be a guest on the show, we want you to be on. And we're looking for somebody from Oath Keepers to come on. We're looking for somebody to really come on and teach us all about fishing and hunting. We're looking for people that have a lot of great knowledge to share about gardening, aquaponics, alternative sources of energy. Anything that you'd like to come on the show and be a guest about, don't be shy. Hit us up on the contact form and let us know today. With that wrapped up, we've got a really great show planned for you today. You know, we've talked a lot about survival planning and how important that is. And we've kind of hinted at it here and there a few times that we were going to do a show on survival partnerships. And you may be wondering how survival partnerships and planning come together. And that's a very important topic, and we're going to get to it in just a second. First, I want to start off with the core value of Survival Chi, if you're new to the show, is community. And that's Survival Chi stands for Community, Health, and Intelligence. And community, it's such an important aspect of survival because we're not lone wolves. We don't work that well as lone wolves. It's just human beings aren't built that way. We're social animals, and we work well together. We get a lot more accomplished together. Communities can be made up of many people or just a handful of people, even as little as 2. Now we're starting to get closer to the conversation about survival partnerships. The show is always focused on the importance of community, but an important aspect of community is making sure it runs well. Because a survival community or any community that does not run well is pointless and counterproductive. And so with that, and you're wondering where Jonathan is, and the truth is we're running into a few scheduling conflicts. I mean, you know what? Life happens. Things come up, and we've all got stuff to do. that could cause a lot of friction. But from the very beginning, we've had a clearly defined set of roles and duties and even contingency plans. Because you know what? We're survivalists. We do contingency plans. And so we have a lot of plans, simple plans for what happens if. Since we've started running into these scheduling conflicts, I thought, that this would be a good time to do the show. It really made me think about that we should share that information of how we've come up with ways to safeguard the partnership and ultimately our friendship, because that's really what this is about, is safeguarding friendships. Share that with everybody on the show. And before we get into the main topic, if anybody's worried about things, we're not exactly sure what's going to happen with these scheduled conflicts, but I can tell you that in the here and now, we do know we get so many great emails in about how much, and one of the things that we hear constantly is how much people love the dynamic aspect of the show, that it's not just a monologue of some guy talking to you and telling you this is how it is and this is what you're going to do. It's two guys, and sometimes more, talking about different perspectives we have on ways to go about surviving. One of the ways that we're going to go get around that so that this doesn't just become a regular monologue is that we're going to start bringing on a lot more guests. And I know that's also part of the reason why we've been doing out a call out for a lot more guests. That, and you know what, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know. And we often never claim to be experts at anything. And so that's what we want, is everybody's great information coming onto the show. And guests have always been part of the show. Now we're just going to bring on more. So getting into it, survival partnerships. They're a pretty common topic in the community, but not one that gets enough attention. I really feel very strongly about that if you listen to the shows and all the different shows, and all of them are really great, we'll say most of them are really great, but the same thing with the blogs. You see all these really wonderful blogs and all these people pouring all of their knowledge and great information out onto the web and putting it out there for us to read and consume and grow from. But so often we don't talk about survival partnerships. But it is a common thing because people, we're back to community. So it's an important aspect to our survival. They can be the single greatest tool we have as individuals and as human beings and as society to get us through rough times. However, if they are mismanaged, they can very easily destroy a friendship, cause a lot of unnecessary friction, and generally just ruin good friendships. And nobody wants that. I mean, that's a terrible thing. So what do we do? How do we manage this? And first, let's get to the root of what is usually the problem. And I'm going to run through a bunch of reasons why partnerships typically fail. But let's start off with a simple kind of illustration of something that can go wrong. The biggest problem is that things are not clearly defined. So let's say you and I decide, hey, let's go on a road trip. If I'm the driver, what if I don't tell you where we're going? I just say, hey, let's go on a road trip. And you say, oh, where are we going? Don't worry about it. It'll be fun. You may absolutely hate where we end up. Or you may love it. Who knows? But now we've opened the risk, because what really laid at the root was that we didn't want to have a conflict, so we didn't talk about it, and we didn't clearly define where we're going. Now, this is a silly illustration. I know most people don't get in a car with another person and just say, screw it, we'll go wherever, but you get the idea. And then all along the way, all kinds of different things can go on. And I'm using road trips not just because it's an easy example, but it's one that, a lot of people say if you can survive in a relationship, you want to test it. Go for a road trip together, spend 8 hours in a car together. And if you can make it through that, then your relationship will work out no matter what. Now, usually that's reserved for romantic relationships, but it works well for friendships or any kind of relationship, really. If you can stay in a car with somebody for 8 hours, you can probably survive just about anything together. And then there's all kinds of conflict that can come up. There's music selection. And I'll give you an example from my own personal life. My girlfriend Jennifer and I get into a car together, and she immediately starts changing the radio station, and she puts on pop country. I cannot stand pop country music. If you like it, that's great. God love you. Have a good time with it. But I just don't really enjoy it. And by the same token, I like classic rock, and I like all kinds of music. I have a very wide, bizarre variety of music that I like to listen to. One second I could be listening to Pink Martini, and the next second I've decided I want to listen to Nine Inch Nails, and it drives most people crazy. So you have to have some sense of, what are we going to listen to? What are we going to do? And then ultimately, when you get there, what are you going to do together? Do you have a clear idea of what activities you're going to do? And sometimes it is just fun to go with the flow. If you know somebody well enough and you know that your interests are closely tied enough, then it doesn't need that much planning. And it can be just a simple thing of, let's go here, let's do this. And simple planning is a very important topic we're going to come to in just a bit. I brought up the topic that there's multiple reasons that partnerships don't work out well. And let's go into those now. So one of the biggest reasons that partnerships don't work out well is that someone ends up feeling cheated. They feel, I'm doing all of the work, and that other guy, he's doing nothing. That is probably the most common. It is certainly the most common in any kind of business ventures. There's always somebody that feels like they're doing all the work, and that other guy, he's not doing anything. Then we can run into other issues where there's disagreements over future plans, or even how current plans are going to be worked out. There's also the problem of interest waning. If you and I decide we're going to pick up an activity together, and we start doing that activity, and the activity for some reason involves both of us, or we are emotionally invested, we'll get a little Dr. Phil for a second. If we're emotionally invested in doing it together, then we can run into the problem where interest wanes. Let's face it, people change their minds, or they lose interest in things. Or priorities change. That's another one too. The final one is that, you know what? Shit happens. Life happens. And people go in different directions. And the expectation that people will never change, or that they're always going to stay as hyper-focused on something as you are, or that their interest level is going to stay as high, or that priority is never going to change, is unrealistic. How do we keep these dreadful things from happening? We plan. We care enough about the friendship to make it actually work out, or to make sure that we're not going to end up destroying the friendship because it didn't work out. And that's where planning comes in place. And a lot of people, as I talked about a second ago, a lot of people will fluff it off, and I don't think they often realize the reason why, but the reason why people fluff off and don't like to talk about and lay things out with one another is that they're worried about a conflict arising. And that's kind of really silly to do if we're talking about a survival partnership. Because the time to find out that two people don't work well together, or work out well in trying to do a venture of some kind together, is not when the shit has hit the fan. And that's largely what our survival plans and our survival partnerships are for, is to make sure that we get through those tough times. So let's start with the first part of this. If you're going to plan, there's some preemptive work that you've got to do here. And it's important for both people to do it, but if only one person does it, that can work out okay. But really, ultimately, you only have control and responsibility for yourself. Let's start with knowing your partner and knowing yourself. What you really want to do for your friend and for yourself is to set each other up for success. You hear that often in business. Bosses will say, I'm only going to set you up for success. And often it's lip service. But we're talking about your friends here. The last people on earth you want to set up for failure. So you want to set them up for success. Understand how you communicate and how another person communicate. And communication doesn't just mean that they communicate well. Sometimes it's understanding that they communicate very badly, or that they have difficulties with stressful situations or stressful topics, and understanding how you're going to work around that. You have to understand that person's strengths and weaknesses. My suggestion would be to write these things out, and write them out privately. This is not necessarily something that you feel the need to share with the other person. It's for your own edification. It's for your own information, knowledge, and gives you a clearly defined understanding of how you're going to go forward with this. Clearly knowing each other and clearly knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses and how those can play off of one another is the only way you're going to end up being able to effectively communicate. I'll give you another example from my own personal life with my girlfriend, Jennifer. I know that we can only have a difficult conversation for about 10 to 15 minutes. And what happens after about 10 to 15 minutes is that she'll either get bored, she'll become more emotional in the conversation than I will. But what knowing this about her means is that I know that I can work around her. I know when to stop. I know when the conversation needs to be done, and I know about how long it's going to take before I can pick that conversation up again. It also means that I know I've got about 10 to 15 minutes to make my point, make it clear, and shut it down and wait X amount of time before I start talking about it again. I also know about myself, because, again, that was part of it, knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses. I know about myself about how long I can talk about something before I completely begin rambling or just go off on some wild tangent that has nothing to do with the topic at all. I also know about how long I can talk about something before I become angry about it or overly emotional about it, and overly in the sense of how it's going to affect my ability to communicate. The next part of this is that you have to be honest. And you have to be honest in the sense that you have to be open to it not working out just as much as you are it working out. What is it we love to say in survival? Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And that applies to partnerships too. People are often afraid that if they get into these conversations, they'll somehow diminish or tarnish the friendship. We're worried about conflict, as I talked about a little while ago. Well, that's simply not true. Not if handled well. If handled poorly, yes, absolutely. All of these things can turn into arguments, heated arguments. But handled well and handled with the care that you're going to give it by doing the preemptive planning of thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and their strengths and weaknesses and understanding how you communicate and understanding how they communicate and understanding where those two may not match up and how you're going to work around it, is caring enough about the friendship and that you're going to keep from diminishing the friendship if you're having the conversation. So it means you're going to care enough about it not to destroy things. Understand that if it works out in the planning phase, it's that much more likely to work out in the actual implementation. If you can't sit down together and clearly define things and work things through things together, what makes you think that it's going to work out when stuff actually goes wrong, whether mildly or quite a bit? And so this is a great way to find out, hey, does this actually work? I owe it to you as my friend to sit down with you and discuss this and figure out, does this work? And that's not to say it's going to work, but it is to say that it is more likely, because if you start clearly defining things, you know where everybody's at. If it doesn't work out on paper and you can't come to an agreement about different things, it's not the end of the friendship. You just say, yeah, this isn't going to work out that well. Or you take the plans back and make them less restrictive and less encompassing. You do less things. You take away the things that aren't going to work and fix those by some other means, whether that's another partnership or whether that just means you do it yourself without them. But understand that if the planning doesn't work out, it doesn't mean it's the end of the friendship. It just means you have a better understanding of who they are, where they are, what their priorities are, and what their interest level is in things. Moving forward, we build a simple plan, fostering collaborative independence. What is collaborative independence? Collaborative independence is collaboration with a focus on safeguarding independence. If we're going to work together and we're going to make sure that everything comes out okay, one of the best things that we can do, aside from the other things that I've pointed out, is to make sure that our plans are not so intertwined and so dependent on one another that if it doesn't work out or something doesn't match up right, that everything blows up. One of the most common topics within survival partnerships is buying a piece of land together. And I think that is one of the fastest way to ruin a really good friendship a lot of times, because there's so many agreements and disagreements that will take place over what to do with the land, when to do it to the land, who can afford what financially, when and how. The benefit is often pointed out as being the two of us together can buy a bigger, nicer piece of land than two of us independently. And while that is true, the next step would be buy it and then figure out a good way to split it in half. Then you have what you were really looking for, which was proximity to one another. You want to be close to each other, but you have the separation so that if something doesn't work out, this is my piece of land, that's your piece of land, and in the heat of the moment, if something doesn't go right, we don't have to figure it out then. We figured it out and cleared the problem before it happens. Yeah, that may mean we're not able to build a bigger bunker together. We may not be able to accomplish everything we could as if we were pooling all of our resources, but we avoid a lot of the pitfalls of partnerships. And if you want to go in together and make an agreement that you are going to do everything together, know that you're opening yourself up to a lot of problems down the road if it dissolves. And that's where we, again, have to be honest with ourselves and with our friends and whoever we've chosen to be our survival partner, is that it may not work out. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. In a nutshell, it means we can work together, but we don't have to. Well, let's say you and I start a little garden together. I decide I want to plant tomatoes. You decide I want eggplant. Well, we can still pool our resources and build a big planter box together, and we can pool our labor and energy and harvest manure, do our composting, do all of that stuff that would have to happen anyway. And then we divvy it up and say, I take this much for eggplants, you take that much for tomatoes. And then it ends up working out well. We've pooled our resources and labor, and we've done something bigger than we could have done separately. Taking it back to road trips and stuff like that, another simple example would be if I decided tomorrow I wanted to go for a fishing trip, I know that Jason McConnell, the Redneck Resource, my partner in the ITRH farm, would be on board faster than I could get the words out of my mouth, because I know he loves fishing as much as I do. And I know he loves fishing in the same way that I do, that it's not necessarily about catching fish. For me, it's more about just going out in a boat, a nice calm surroundings, throwing a line in the water, and sitting around and BSing. I'm not that focused on what I catch. I love fishing, and I love fishing for those reasons, and I have very fond childhood memories of them, and so does Jason McConnell. I also know that while I would tell John, hey, I'm going to go fishing, you're more than welcome to join me if you like, I know that he doesn't like fishing. He doesn't like any part of fishing. That goes back to understanding people and understanding the people that are in your life and being realistic. If I was going to be childish about it, I could get mad. Well, you don't want to go fishing with me. You don't want to spend time with me. You don't want to hang out with me. And that's not it at all. I know he doesn't like fishing. Now, if we wanted to include John and make sure that he had a good time, we could say, let's go camping. Fishing will be part of it. Jason and I are going to go off for a couple hours every day and go fishing. You can do whatever you want to do. Or when we come back, we'll all go do a joint activity together or whatever. But we make plans and we have the understanding of what people do and don't want to do. And we don't make assumptions. Another example on the same thread would be if I was going to go down to the Museum of Fine Art. Jonathan would probably be like, yeah, that's badass. Let's go. Let's go check out some whatever exhibit is there. Jason, we kind of interested, but not to the same degree that Jonathan and I would be about art. He may not mind going, but it's not something where he's going to want to stay at the museum all day, spend lots of time, really look at all these paintings and stand around and talk about them endlessly. He's probably going to be bored out of his mind. That really illustrates not making assumptions about what other people will not do, want to do, don't want to do. You have to know people. You have to care enough about them to know what they do and don't want to do. You have to be clear in your division of labor and resources. Again, back to the gardening box that you and I built together. You're a darn good partner, by the way. If we're going to divide our labor and resources, it may be not necessarily equal in every aspect, but that's what we have to agree upon. Let's say, for example, I'm a little hard up for cash this month. You and I make the agreement that you're going to buy the lumber, but I'm going to do the majority of the labor. And we come to that understanding and agreement. Then there's nothing to argue about afterwards. There's nothing to say, oh, well, you sat on your butt while I brought in all this soil and everything and put it into the box, and you get mad and say, well, you cheap jerk, you didn't put any money in for the lumber that went into building this raised bed. There's nothing to argue about because we figured it out beforehand. The next part that's really important in every relationship of any kind is managing expectations. If I expect you to do this and you expect me to do that, we can't make assumptions about it. We can't let it be, oh, well, they know what I mean. It has to be defined. It has to come out. If you have a friend that you've had for 15 years and you can do things for the most part without talking about them, that's certainly something that you're now able to do, and you know how each other work. But most cases, it's not that way. And what you risk by not saying anything is a misunderstanding and hard feelings. What you risk by actually sitting down and talking about it casually in a simple way, saying, hey, I'm going to do this. What are you going to do? Or are you going to do this? Do I need to do that? Figuring all these things out in advance. You don't risk anything. You have nothing to risk by that. If somebody gets their feelings hurt by that, not necessarily a good partner anyway. They're being juvenile about it. But that's pretty rare, actually. But managing expectations is very important. If I have the expectation that you're going to purchase the lumber, and you have the expectation that I'm going to do the work of building the planter box and putting the soil in and getting everything together, if we don't communicate that, we've opened the opportunity for a lot of things to go amiss. One of the great things that Jason McConnell and I do to make sure the farm keeps running well and that we know who's doing what and that things are getting done, and we have a clear understanding of, hey, when I see he's doing a little bit more than me, I need to chip in here and vice versa, is that we keep a spreadsheet online through Google Apps, and it's a very detailed task list of what needs to happen, and we put our names next to things. One of the other aspects of it is, I have kind of goofy schedules, and we can't always sit down and do it together. So what we did was found a way that we could, in our own time, collaborative independence here, work on that spreadsheet individually. And I can see what he's signed himself up for, and he can see what I've signed myself up for, and we can put bigger task items up on the list that clearly say this is going to take both of us to do. From there, we also then schedule things out. We actually put it on a calendar. We're going to do this on this day and this on this day. And it's, hey, you know what? This is a little bitty task. I'm just going to do it during the middle of the week or whatever, whenever I've got some random free time available, or on a weekend when I have some random free time together. But we're not always working on the farm at the same time. Half the time we're doing things independently. He'll go up there when I'm not there. I'll go up there when he's not. But there is a clear division of labor. There's an agreed upon list of tasks, and there's an agreed upon order in which things happen, and then there's an agreed upon workload. We have a very old friendship, a very strong friendship, and for the most part, it doesn't take that much planning together to do things. We know how each other works. We know who's going to do what when, but we have safeguarded any hard feelings by making sure that there is organization and agreements about how things are going to get done. If you're worried about things becoming heated during the planning process, I'll give you an old trick that an ex-girlfriend of mine and I used to do. It actually kept us from having a single fight, a real fight, for probably about 4 years. We agreed that we would have pull the pin votes. Each person in the course of a discussion could say, I'm pulling the pin. And that meant that the conversation was over. At least for that time being. That meant I'm getting too emotionally involved in this, you're getting too emotionally involved. And this is about to become a heated debate. But that person also had the responsibility to then offer an activity, a fun activity to go do together that was something unrelated to whatever it was we were talking about, to kind of let things cool down a little bit. That person also had to offer the time of when the topic would be revisited. And that's a very important part. You can't just blow it off and say, well, I don't want to talk about it now. When do you want to talk about it? You have to actually say, and make an agreed upon time of when you're going to get back to it. That keeps everything copacetic. You know, it's like Toyota, I think, has the commercials, or used to have the commercials a long time ago where they would, or maybe it was even Saturn, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. But they used to have the great commercials where it was anybody on the production line, if they saw something wrong, they had the ability to stop the entire production line. And that's really the same concept of what I'm talking about here, is that either person in the conversation, or if it's got multiple people in the conversation, somebody can say, pulling a pin, we're going to go do this to have fun together instead, let this cool off for a while, and I propose that we revisit the topic at this time. And also, if you come back to the topic at a later time, and you can't have a civilized conversation about it, and it starts to get heated again, pull the pin again and keep doing it until you get it right. Did it for years, worked out really well. Never had a real fight to speak of, because somebody always ended up stopping it as soon as it even remotely looked like it was going to get heated. Some conversations really did take a lot longer than either one of us would have liked to have sorted out. But in the end, we sorted it out without having a screaming match. And a resolution was always found, even when we decided it was no longer time to continue seeing each other. The final piece, and I touched on this a little while ago, have a clear, defined set of bullet points of what's going to happen if it doesn't work out. Going back to the planter box that you and I have together, God, our garden's looking really good, by the way. We also have to, before we even start, decide how, if this doesn't work out well, how do we divvy this up? We've got this giant planter box. We can't just take a chainsaw and cut it in half. That would be unproductive. Well, maybe we agree that if it doesn't work out, I'm going to buy the planter box from you. Or you're going to buy my half of the planter box from me. Put a dollar amount on it. Whatever you want to do, whatever makes it work for you. But have a clear set of, this is what happens if. To close things out, remember, set each other up for success. Bolster each other's strengths and buttress each other's weaknesses. If those are your main focal points, you're probably going to get through the planning phase just fine. And you're probably going to get through any problem you have, whether it's an internal disagreement or whether it's one of the many things that we as survivalists worry can happen. You're probably going to get through those things just fine. Be as open to the idea that it will not work out as you are open to the idea that it will work out. That helps manage expectations. That helps manage your expectations, and it helps manage the other person's expectations that it's going to work. You also have the feeling that, hey, it doesn't work out, it's okay. And you don't end up with hard feelings towards one another about it, or worse, some kind of big fight or something. Work out a simple plan. Don't be afraid to work out a simple plan. Don't be afraid to have disagreements. We are each individuals. We are going to disagree about things. But make a simple plan. You don't have to detail it out in every last tiny minutia, unless both people are very obsessive about things, which that usually doesn't happen. But if both people are truly obsessive about things, they can go crazy and detail it out in the most minute, ridiculous minutia you can imagine. But for the most part, have the idea that you're going to keep it simple, go through the top level stuff, and just figure things out. And as you go through things, you'll figure out pretty quickly if something needs more defining or if something is fine where it is, simply defined. Do these things because you care enough about your friendship not to destroy it. And do these things because ultimately the goal here is to survive. And if your partnership breaks down in the middle of a crisis, it was of no use to you. And you were no use to it. Ultimately, remember that you're going to do this because you care about your friend, and you care about your friend enough to not destroy the friendship. And with that, we wrap up episode 76. Thank you for joining me today.
This has been an episode from the In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great survival stuff.